Okay now, Jill?
Yes, Chair, you can open the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome to the remote meeting of the Statutory Licence Subcommittee taking place on Monday the 1st of March, which is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. I am Councillor Joyce Maitland and I will be chairing today's meeting. I am joined by Councillor Caroline Hampson, Karen Little and Marion Wilson. If my connection is lost, Councillor Hampson will take over until my connection is restored. Before I commence the formal business of the agenda, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. Could you please all participate? Please mute their microphones. To speak, please use the chat function on the right-hand side or type RTS. Requests to speak, remember everyone in the meeting can see the messages on the chat function. We invite you to speak by me. Please remember to unmute your microphone. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and position unless you have already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having issues with the connectivity, try switching off your video and use your telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. Thank you. Moving into the agenda, number 1, apologies for absence. Jill?
We have no apologies for absence, Chair.
Substitute members?
There are no substitute members, Chair.
Declaration of interest? The minutes of the meeting held on the 12th, 13th and 19th of January. Does any members have any comments on the meetings?
No, Chair.
Can I have a mover, please, for the minutes?
I'll move them, Chair.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second them, Chair. Councillor Marion Wilson.
Thanks very much. Right, moving into item 5 is an application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of Stanhope Field to the south-east of Stanhope Village. I would like to welcome the parties to the hearing, who are Mr. Alec Hutchinson, the applicant. Welcome, Mr. Hutchinson. Objectors, Julie and Graham Lamb. Welcome, Julie and Graham. We also are joined by the licensing team leader, Helen Johnson, Committee Services Officer, Jill Errington, and Kirsty Charlton, and the legal advisor to the subcommittee is Catherine Hazel. Please note that all 4 members will sit during the hearing today, but only 3 will make the decision. I will now ask for Catherine to explain why we do this and to run through the procedure. Thank you. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is a statutory licensing hearing in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, which means that only 3 members are entitled to make the decision today. However, during any hearing, there's always a risk that conflicts of interest can arise, or a member takes ill or loses connection to the hearing, forcing them to retire. And if this happens, it would mean that today's meeting would have to be concluded due to it being in quorum, and a new hearing would have to be arranged. Therefore, to ensure that this does not happen, additional members are asked to participate so they can stand in for any member that has to retire. Having had the benefit of taking part in today's hearing, this member will have all the information and the understanding necessary to make an informed decision. With regard to the procedure today, we'll first hear from Mrs. Johnson, the licensing team leader, who will present her report to the subcommittee, and then everybody is given the opportunity to ask questions of her, and you'll be invited to do so by the chair. We'll then hear from the objectors, Mr. and Mrs. Lamb, and they'll present their representations to the subcommittee, and everybody is then given the option or the opportunity to ask questions of them. And we'll then go to Mr. Hutchinson, and he can explain his representations to the subcommittee, and each party gets an opportunity to ask questions of him. And once everybody's had an opportunity to present their representations, the chair will invite each party to sum up, and then the meeting will end and the members will go into a separate deliberations meeting to determine the outcome of today's hearing. A more formal written notification will be sent out in the post afterwards, but each party will be advised by telephone later on today of the outcome of the hearing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we move into the Licensed and Officers Report. Helen?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. So as outlined, this is an application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of Stanhope Field to the south east of Stanhope Village, to the immediate east of the sewerage works approaching Frosterley. You'll see at Appendix 2 at page 42, there's a location plan which has been provided by the applicant, which outlines that particular field, also any staging, any bar area and things like that. The application was received on the 5th of January by Mr. Alex Hutchinson of Integrated Event Management Limited. And within the application, it stated that the area is a large open outdoor site consisting of a single field. The application's attached as Appendix 3, pages 44 to 63. You'll see in there as well the steps that Mr. Hutchinson's put forward for the promotion of the licensing objectives, and he applied for the following. So the application is for the following activities, specifically limited to 2 full weekends per year, Friday, Saturday and Sunday per weekend between the months of May and September inclusive. Amplified music from an indoor stage within a temporary structure and a smaller stage positioned outside of the same temporary structure. Also applied for is the provision of live music indoors and outdoors and the performance of dance indoors only. Friday 4 p.m. until 11:30 p.m, Saturday 11 a.m. until midnight, and on a Sunday 11 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. Also the provision of recorded music indoors and outdoors, Friday 4 p.m. until 12:30 a.m, Saturday 11 a.m. until 1 a.m, and on a Sunday 11 a.m. until 12:30 a.m. Late night refreshment outdoors only. For those people who aren't aware of what there's a typo there as well. It says light night refreshment. It should be late night refreshment. That's the supply of hot food or hot drink, which occurs between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. So for this one, it's Friday and a Sunday, 11 p.m. until 1 a.m. and on a Saturday, 11 p.m. until 1:30 a.m. There's also applied for the sale by retail of alcohol on the premises only on a Friday, 4 p.m. until 12:30 a.m, on a Saturday, 11 a.m. until 1 a.m, and on a Sunday, 11 a.m. until 12:30 a.m. You'll also, at page 64 of the report, there's some additional information being submitted by Mr. Hutchinson, whereby, just for some clarification, that second stage only to be used for one of the 2 weekends. On the other weekend, only one indoor stage will be used for live music. And the second point was that at no point will all 4 bars be used at once. For one weekend, bars 1, 2 and 3, and on the other weekend, bars 1, 2 and 4 will be used. Those, if this application's granted, will become more clearer as a condition within the operating schedule, just to outline that. There was a 28-day consultation period which ended on the 2nd of February. During the consultation period, we received 3 letters in opposition of the application. Those are attached as Appendix 4, pages 66 to 78. From Mr. and Mrs. Lamb, Mr. and Mrs. Bruin and Mr. and Mrs. Riordan. They're classed as other persons within the Act. We also received responses from responsible authorities. They're attached as Appendix 5, pages 80 to 84, where we received them from Durham Constabulary and County Durham and Darlington Fire and Rescue, who had no comments. We did receive an objection from Environmental Health. However, there was then 2 conditions agreed and mediated between Mr. Hutchinson and Environmental Health, and you'll see at page 84 conditions were agreed. If you want me to go quickly through them, is number 1 is a noise management plan must be submitted to and agreed by the community protection team. a minimum of 2 calendar months prior to the first event. The noise management plan shall be formulated with due consideration of the Noise Council's Code of Practice on Environmental Noise Control at Constance guidance, and will include but not be limited to identification of relevant noise sensitive receptor, relevant monitoring points, monitoring methodology, measured background noise level and threshold noise music level value at the stage to include for low frequency noise. The agreed noise management plan shall be fully adhered to for all events containing music. And the second one is that the LZEQ T15 min of any amplified music, live singing or live entertainment arising from the event after 11 p.m. must not exceed the LZEQ T15 min of underlying ambient when an event is not in operation by 0 dB in any third octave frequency band when measured 1 metre from the facade of affected sensitive receptors. To ensure the above a noise threshold level in each third octave band shall be set at the stage stroke boundary and monitored during any event. The threshold value to achieve the above shall be submitted and agreed with the local authority a minimum of 2 months prior to the first event. As a result of those conditions being agreed, the Environmental Health Department withdrew the representation to the application and considered a hearing not necessary. So again, if the licence is granted, those 2 particular conditions will form part of the licence for that. Just going on back to the report, Chair, the subcommittee is asked to determine the application with a view to promote the licence and objectives, and the subcommittee is recommended to give appropriate weight to the steps that are appropriate to promote the licence and objectives. The representations, including any supporting information presented by all parties, Durham County Council Statement of Licensing Policy, which you'll see page 86 to 95 at Appendix 6, the relevant parts of the policy are attached, and also the Section 182 guidance. Again, the relevant parts are attached as Appendix 7, pages 97 to 104. Options available to members today are to grant the licence subject to the conditions that are consistent with the operating schedule, accompanying the application and the mandatory conditions set out by the Licensing Act 2003, grant the licence subject to modified conditions to that of the operating schedule where the committee considers it appropriate for the promotion of the licence and objectives, to exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates to refuse to specify a person on the licence as a designated premises supervisor, or lastly, Chair, to reject the application. Thank you, Chair, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Lamb, have you any questions of the officer, please?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Mr. Hutchinson, have you any questions for the officer?
I don't know. That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, we move on to the objector. Mr. and Mrs. Lamb, are you both going to speak, or is one of you just going to speak?
I'm afraid it's just me today.
Right, thank you. Now's your chance to put your case forward, please.
Sure. Thank you. Obviously, we only became aware of the application from the notices around the property at the time, and with it being in lockdown, that was incredibly lucky that we walked past. We looked at when we moved to Stanhope 11 years ago. We looked at areas around the Stanhope show field, and we kind of discounted them areas with regards buying a house in that area because of the noise. And obviously we chose Railway Terrace because of its location. Obviously this application will actually bring noise to us. We looked at the application, and I work in the fire safety industry myself. So when I noticed that the industry standard being used for the noise generated, which is just an industry standard, is going to be equal to 65 or no more than 65 decibels at the first house or the first dwelling, obviously that's equal to the sound of a fire alarm sounding in your property, which generally wakes everybody up. So that concerns us greatly, and we've included that in our submission. We're also deeply concerned about the traffic management of the event. We obviously live in an area where the unclassified road at the rear of our property, or at the front of our property, sorry, have significant pinch points throughout the road, and often myself and my neighbours can't park near our properties, and we end up parking in the stand-up centre because of the Heatherview campsite that has expanded significantly over the last 11 years. So that's another reason that we're concerned. The pinch points and the down by the bridge leading from Railway Terrace are quite significant, and looking at the egress points from the fields, obviously that will become, assuming that you get the 10,000 people a day associated with the licence application, that will be, we believe, will become an inhibitory factor to gaining access to our properties. Just moving on a little bit, we're obviously concerned about the current promotion of the event. If you look at the website, the event organiser clearly promotes the use of scooters, vehicles and motorhomes. And I guess we wonder how that will impact us. And I think, the river as well. We're concerned about the river. There's obviously unfenestrated areas around the river area, with the culvert in particular just next to the bridge already being cracked, and many of the access points identified on the application being across the stream and across the culvert. And I guess we wonder what will happen there. And I think that kind of summarises our concerns.
Thank you. We move on. Mr. Hutchinson, have you any questions to ask Mr. Lamb, or would you like to have the traffic management and that? Would you like to cover it in your statement, or would you like to answer them now on the traffic management? How are you going to control it?
I don't have a question per se relating to representation, so I'll just summarise it all in a statement, if that's okay. Thank
you. Sorry, Helen, I should have asked you first. Any questions of Mr. Lamb?
No, I've got no questions, Chair.
Thank you. Has any of the members of the committee any questions?
No, Chair.
No. Thank you. So now we move on to the applicant, Mr. Hutchinson. It's your turn to put your statement forward, please.
Thank you. So both Mr. Lamb's representation and the other two that were submitted address broadly similar points. So I'll just run through those key points and explain our approach to those. So the first thing that I would like to acknowledge is that I don't feel that any of the concerns are invalid for 1 second. But I do think that we've already taken appropriate steps to manage any risk that they would pose to our adherence to licence and objectives, and I'll try and explain quickly why. First of all, there's a reference in Mr. Lamb's representation that refers to the sound pressure generated by a fire alarm, and that is entirely correct, but sound pressure is not audibility. Those two are distinctly different factors, and that's exactly why, in conjunction with environmental health, we've agreed the two conditions that were referred to earlier. They specifically refer to LZ values, the Z values being specific octaves and how they travel, and the LEQ values, which are the effective audibility. So it's important to know that, yes, the sound pressure, if you're directly in front of the stage at the festival, would be directly translatable or equal to a fire alarm sounding. But the conditions that we've agreed with environmental health mean that they absolutely will not be the same in levels of audibility outside the perimeter at any of the nearest residents. In fact, we haven't even attempted to vary from the industry standards, the POP codes or Noise Council guidelines. So we've agreed to adhere to those exactly as they're written in full, which is currently the best and most uppermost advice relating to noise management at events in the UK. I'll move quickly to, I'll just summarise there on sound. We will appoint a chartered sound practitioner, a noise consultant, somebody who deals in that area, is an exclusive expert in that area. Their recommendations will be submitted in a noise management plan to environmental health, as is stated in the condition, and we will then accept those in full. Specifically, post 11 p.m, the condition is simply that at the nearest residence it will be inaudible, and we will adhere to that. It is doable, it's achievable, and we've already committed to it. Move to traffic. In relation to traffic management, is Stanhope an ideal site for traffic management? No, it's not. There are clearly concerns, which is why within our application we have again already stated we'll engage a competent traffic management provider, which will be one that is LANTRA registered and works in highways, motorway traffic management, etc. We will ask them for their recommendations, and then we will implement those recommendations in full. In the last 10 years, I've been in control of well over 100 music festivals. We haven't delivered a festival that hasn't been measurably safer to road traffic due to the intensive management that's put in place for those events. Will there be a small amount of congestion? Of course there will. There's congestion when the shops reopen on a Monday. Will it be entirely safe? Yes, it absolutely will. And as part of that, we will not be using the lane that moves to the river, which is highlighted in 2 of the representations, nor will we be using Railway Terrace. Railway Terrace will, however, be used for the residents of Railway Terrace, who will be diverted by their own route, which is excluded by the traffic management plan, to ensure that they have constant and free-flowing access to and from their dwelling. The final point that I'll bring up, which again is mentioned in all 3 representations, and I'm a bit surprised by it, but I will address it. River safety. Regionally, it is a topic of interest. The one thing I would say here is Stanhope, in all days, every summer, has a large number of people congregating around the rivers, and those people are effectively unmanaged. There isn't normally a competent management team there to address any concerns relating to that, except when our festival's there, where there are a substantial number of sober, sensible, competent and qualified professionals who are there to be able to offer any guidance, support, divert people away from hazardous points, and also fundamentally undertake a rescue where somebody were to become in difficulty in those areas. Coincidentally, the team that we use for our security are the same that undertake a lot of beach festivals around the UK, and actually happen to be several of them qualified lifeguards. So I can't envisage that river safety is actually anything other than significantly improved by our presence in the area on those weekends. I'd be very surprised if there was anything that could really explain why that would be otherwise. I think that's the key points there covered in the representation. They all relate largely to sound and traffic management. Fundamentally on those points, our representation in favour of our licence would simply be that we have already agreed with the responsible authorities that are deemed to be the experts in those areas suitable steps that promote the licensing objectives in relation to those matters. And that would be my statement for now, please.
Thank you. Helen, have you any questions?
Just off the top of my head, Alex, if obviously under current circumstances, and obviously we don't know, following restrictions lifting and everything, when are you looking to hold any sort of your first event? Would it be obviously after June time?
Yeah, so not just in my case, but in the wider industry, things are extremely fluid at present. So we did have an event that was first penciled for May. We reached the conclusion that festival was impossible to manage in a way that would correspond to the current regulations for social distancing. So that event has been postponed until mid to late September. There is still a festival planned for the last weekend of June, but again, we've put into our operating schedule that we will fully comply with any legislation or guidance in place at that time. So if those guidance, as has been suggested in the roadmap, includes social distancing becoming, and I don't think it's going to suddenly vanish, but if it becomes non-regulatory, then there is an intention to run a festival at the end of June, but only if it can be safely done correctly in accordance with the legislation at that time.
Yeah. Just the other one is, would you be engaging with the council safety advisory group in regards to this event, if it was to go ahead, if you've got the licence? of the Safety Advisory Group?
Yeah, so a lot of the relevant parties that sit on the Safety Advisory Group we already liaise with, and a lot of those parties, Fire and Rescue Police, North East Ambulance Service, have constant ongoing dialogue with us about this and several other festivals. We will formally submit to SAG this year. I appreciate it's not a requirement sitting on private land with a premises licence, hopefully, but we will do so anyway. I think if nothing else, because this year is unusual. And nobody has quite figured out what is necessarily the best and foremost way to undertake any activities put in a sort of post-COVID recovery phase. So particularly in the current climate, I would submit, if nothing else, for some feedback and guidance from SAG. Yeah. Okay.
I've got nothing further at this point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb, have you any questions, please?
Sure, yeah. So it's an interesting point that you mentioned the proposed traffic management and sound surveys. Well, why were these not done before the application? Or if the recommendations as regards traffic and sound are significant, would these be shared with everybody?
Yeah, sorry. So the reason they haven't been undertaken at this point is effectively simply because of the natural process that these applications take. So a traffic management plan and a sound management plan are fundamentally designed by experts to comply with the conditions that are attached to the premises licence, which gives permission for the activities to take place. It's therefore impossible to actually produce those plans until the conditions are known, and those conditions stem from this hearing and this process. So they just simply logically have to take that thorough process. What I would say is our noise management plan, we have this in place again for every festival. We run over 100 in the last 10 years. They always invariably include a hotline for any local residents that have any concerns of any sort. Our sound consultants would be out on the site Wednesday and Thursday of the week to undertake the ambient surveys, etc. And at any time in that phase, they'd quite happily stop and explain absolutely everything that's in place. Fundamentally, though, we have a legal obligation to make sure that the conditions are met, and those conditions are such that we will meet all standards present in the UK for noisy outdoor events, and we will be inaudible within a nearby dwelling after 11 p.m. How we necessarily achieve that in terms of the technology that goes into it, I can't answer that because I'm not a noise consultant, but the plan will be produced and it will be made available to the authorities first. And then if you would like a copy of it, once it's all agreed with the authorities, I have no issue with that at all.
Have any more questions?
Yes, yeah. So you suggested there that there'd be a hotline. So obviously, you're quite experienced in this area, and this hotline must have been in place for some time. So on how many occasions have you run these festivals where this hotline has been contacted, sound or traffic issues have been applied, and how many times has that affected your output?
At almost every festival that we've ever run, it would be. I don't run music festivals specific to aggravate people who live nearby. If there are concerns, I want to address those concerns, and the reason I pay a lot of experts a lot of money is to make sure that if there is a problem, they can respond to it and address it very, very quickly. I'm not suggesting for a second that if somebody rings up and says, I can hear the music from my house, that's avoidable. What I am saying is if they ring it up, we can verify whether it does exceed levels that are accepted to be excessive in the UK, and if it does, then we'll address it immediately. And that does happen on a very regular basis. Even a change in the wind can change the sound output, and we'll respond to that within minutes.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Now we move into members. Moving in the chair, I'll ask you a question first. Do you have any restrictions on children and, like the time with children and things like that, or are you leaving it up to like parental control?
So one of our conditions of entry to any events that we run is that anyone under the age of 18 must be responsible, accompanied by a responsible person over the age of 18. And I stress responsible. That is not simply a person who happens to be more than 18 years and one day. If at any point the responsible person is deemed to be no longer responsible by virtue of vulnerability, that group would be asked to leave the event. The same applies on entry. Within the festival, again, children have to be accompanied at all times. It's not enough that an adult happens to be at the festival, they need to be with that adult. And outside of the scope of anything that we would see as negligent, then beyond that point, we'll leave it up to the parents' discretion as to what is and isn't acceptable for their children.
Thank you. Moving to members. Any of the members, any questions?
Can I
Karen?
speak, please? The 3-day event, is it 3 separate days or is it a 3-day event where people can camp on your site?
Sorry, that's actually a very good question and something I should have brought up earlier. It relates back to the traffic management, actually. So, no, the vast majority of the people who attend these festivals arrive on the Friday and they camp within the festival perimeter until the Monday morning. That's one of the reasons why traffic management is actually largely mitigated, because there's an assumption if 10,000 people are coming, that might equate to, say, 2,000 cars. 2,000 cars in one day and out the same day, in one day, out the next day. That can seem really excessive. Actually, when that number is spread over 3 days, there are very few road networks that can't safely take that.
So they'll be going in on a Friday and probably leaving on the Sunday?
The vast majority of the attendees will, yeah. There are a small number who don't want to camp. They live nearby. I say a small number, actually. There's quite a lot of people from Stanhope attend the festivals. So there are some number of people that arrive and leave each day, but I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of the attendants arrive on the Friday and leave on the Monday.
Right. Thank
Karen,
you.
Karen, have you any questions?
Not at this point, Chair.
Marion? No. Right, the legal officer. Catherine, have you any questions?
No, I've got no questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now's your final chance to address the committee. We start with the licensing officer. Have you anything to add?
Chair, if I can just come back to ask a question, if that's okay. What, in terms of traffic management, Alex, what are you looking at? Any park and ride sort of stuff? People who can't, obviously, who aren't driving, or people who might just come for a 1 day and obviously don't want to drive because they might be consuming alcohol, things like that kind of stuff. Any consideration there?
Yeah, so one of the first things to be pointed out here is that the car parking for the event attendees that aren't camping is outside of the perimeter of the licensed premises. It's actually the other end of Stanhope, where there are actually better access roads, because you can come down straight from Consett or you can come in from Allendale Way. All the parking is contained there, and we then pay for shuttle buses that move them from that area down to the main site and take them back at the end of the night. The main reason for that is because the road access into that main field can be done safely, but it takes some really intensive traffic management to do it. And we'd rather that really intensive work was done just on the Friday and just on the Monday than trying to repeat that process all day, every day through the weekend. So yes, there'll be a park and ride there, and there is another shuttle bus plan to bring people in from Durham and Crook areas specifically.
Thank you, Chair. I've got nothing. I don't know if
again, Joyce, please.
Sorry, it's the objector first. Have you anything else to add, Mr. Lamb?
Yeah, I was a bit concerned to hear that I'll have 10,000 campers within 500 metres of my house, I suppose, yes.
Thank you. Karen, was that you wanting to ask another question?
Can I come in?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson, is there going to be security on for the whole of this festival?
Yes, there is. By a happy coincidence, I also own a security company that specialises in events around the country. Yeah, so there'll be in excess of 90 security staff there for the weekend, which, in terms of management to attendees, is actually an extremely high ratio that not many venues meet.
Okay, thank you.
Finally, Mr. Hutchinson, have you anything else you would like to add?
Only to draw attention to the track records that the festivals already have at the other end of Stanhope. So the management team responsible have shown over the last 8 years, and the responsible authorities would almost certainly on consultation agree. We don't draw on resources. We do manage in an extremely self-sufficient and responsible manner. The other thing that, depending on the outcome of this, I would like to just raise for the purpose of the gentleman who's objected to the application. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't work in adversity against local residents. So moving forwards, regardless of the outcome of the hearing today, if there are any concerns, simply contact the relevant festival's websites and we will work with you to address those problems. Thank you.
And finally, Catherine, would you like to come in now, please? If you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I haven't got any questions, so if nobody else has anything further to say, then Chair, you need to confirm which members will make the decision today.
Thank you. Which members will be sitting on the deliberation?
Councillor Carol Hampson, me.
Councillor Karen Liddell.
Thank you very much. So with that, we'll now retire in private to consider the representation, and all parties will be notified of this decision by the licensing officer later today. Thank you. Any other business? I've not been informed of any. So before the broadcast ends, I would like to thank those members of the public and the media who have watched this meeting. If you wish to find out the decision, please email licensing@durham.gov.uk. The address also can be found on our website with papers for the meeting. Thank you very much.